No mai, haere mai. Welcome to the Maxim Institute podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm the Communications Manager at Maxim Institute. This is our weekly short-form podcast. These podcasts are released in tandem with our weekly column and are a chance for you to hear in depth from the column's author about some of the thinking that went into producing their final piece. Today we talk to Executive Director Tim Wilson about his latest column. Tim, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you, mate.
Great to be here.
We are talking about your latest column for Maxim, How to See Through Squid Ink. That's an interesting title. What is squid ink?
So if you pursue a squid or an octopus,
Yes.
And they become frightened, they'll eject ink into the water, which creates this confusing blur that then makes it hard to find the victim. So
they can affect their escape.
They can escape.
Poof, you can't see me, I'm gone. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a slang term so squid ink is a slang term for when someone deliberately confuses a situation to their own advantage. So for example, your boss calls you in and says, "Hey, you're not doing enough widgets. Your widget counts down on a daily basis." And then
My boss does that to me all the time,
I do
mate.
it to you all the time. And then you say, "Well, actually, the reason is because of my colleague who is always talking to me about my boss." Squirt.
Just like,
there's
what's going on?
Yeah. So suddenly it's like, oh, wait, what's going on?
Children are actually really good at that.
They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you hit your brother?
Yeah.
Oh, he poked his tongue out at me. Why did you poke your tongue out at him? Because he called me a name, and you just like, okay, so I got to rank all these offences. Who's worse?
Yeah. So they're really good at it, but also government agencies sometimes, or higher learnings of institutions of learning are good at it too.
There was a recent exchange between universities and the Education Review Office. Now, the Education Review Office put out a survey that said 60% of new teachers don't feel supported by the training they get, and that's a pretty big assertion, given that universities train 90% of our primary and secondary teachers. And they also then the group who had done the research, speaking in a radio interview, said that non-universities were twice as good at training.
Just to twist the knife a little bit, right? 90% of teachers don't feel supported, and actually non-universities
twice as effective as in preparing new teachers than the universities. So the universities fired back saying, "Oh, this is a terrible survey. They only surveyed a tiny amount of new teachers, and we're just we don't think that they can make these claims on the basis of that." And it's true, they did survey 23 new teachers, but they also surveyed 751 teachers. So you'll get a take from new teachers, of course, but the ones that can assess it probably better are the teachers who are currently in the system, old hands, they've been around for a while. The interesting thing about this is, to be statistically valid, you only need 400.
Okay.
So to be robust. So 751, I think it's getting pretty robust.
Yeah. So that's a bit of squid ink from the universities. So they're pulling out something saying...
They're pulling out something,
yeah.
But they're not putting it in the context of all the other numbers. And by the way, Aero, they tap data from Stats New Zealand, Ministry of Education, Teachers Council. They talked to 271 principals. This is not a study that seemed to be lacking in statistical robustness.
And so you identify as well in the column that this is not the first time that this sort of tactic's being used in public debates either.
Yeah.
So there's other agencies that do this. Like,
I think it's something that happens quite a lot. It's not just agencies who are competing for the same turf. And I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, so if I'm sensing there's some ink around, I've got to find the squid. And how do you find the squid? It's by determining who's got the most to lose, who's got the most to gain from these numbers. Are there any other numbers? And look, very interesting. Say, for example, we talk about our GDP. Oh, okay. So, guess what? It's going down. Actually, what's GDP per capita? Oh, it's actually going down much more because immigration's increased. So we really need to just be, what's the quote? There are lies, damned lies, and statistics.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's how you get squidding.
So the GDP example is a classic one in that you can be increasing your GDP, but your GDP per capita could be going down. And so you could say, well, GDP is going up and everyone celebrates, but the reality is it's not like that. And so that's kind of what had happened in this situation, and that's what happens in other situations where other things like other organizations like the media or Law and Order, they'll take in discussions like that.
I think in those discussions, so for example, if we're talking about charter schools right now, and you'll hear information from the unions. Now, I think, unions do a great job, aspects of representing teachers. The question is, what's their stake in the charter school discussion? Is it that they want to protect the numbers of teachers they have working for them, keep those people within the union, or is it that they care about the education of young people? That's a discussion we need to have when we look at the statistics and the data that they offer.
And so it's maybe putting more context around the conversation, or making yourself aware of the context around the conversation.
Yeah, look, if it seems too good to be true or too bad to be true, maybe it is.
Yeah. And so once we identify, or we ask that question, who's got the most to lose, who's got something to gain out of this, we can identify the squid.
See where the squid is, and you can. I mean, if you see the ink, that'll probably lead you to the squid. But you need to have that context of just who's got something to gain or lose here. So the notion, for example, that universities train 90% of our new teachers, it's clear that they've got a stake in this. It's not just a discussion about the same facts. It's a turf war over something that they're highly invested in.
And that's something that we need to be aware of as the public, and when we are entering into discussions like this, so that we're not taken in by it.
Yeah, and look, I'm sorry. It's again to go back to my original point, which is that if it's too good, or if it seems too good or bad to be true, maybe dig into it a bit, because you'll find. You may be able to find some greater context, like I did with this issue that the universities had with Aero. They said, the survey's not good enough. Actually, it's pretty good.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being with us and giving us some things to chew on when it comes to identifying where we might need to dig a bit deeper into these discussions.
Here's the deal, Jason. If you can identify the squid, the ink becomes more legible.
Excellent. Thanks for being with us.
The term squidding describes when we deliberately confuse a situation for our own advantage. It's based on what squid and octopi do when attacked, i.e. releasing ink into the water as a confusing blur. A human example: your boss calls you in to rinse you over your failure to make sufficient widgets on a daily basis. You blame this on a co-worker who keeps distracting you with gossip about your boss. Clarity thus becomes confusion. Thank you, squidding. The phrase comes to mind watching a recent stoush between our universities and the Education Review Office, or ERO. You see, ERO released data suggesting that 60% of new teachers didn't feel supported by the training they received. Since universities train about 90% of our new primary and secondary teachers, by one estimate, it's no surprise they took umbrage. Then, the head of the ERO Evaluation Centre, Ruth Shinoda, told a radio interview that, in fact, the non-universities were twice as effective at preparing new teachers than the universities. Shinoda said graduates from one education provider report being twice as prepared as graduates from another. We really need to reduce that variation, and we really need to make sure they have more time to learn in a classroom. The salvo had been fired. The universities duly responded. Quote, "We are concerned about ERO's use of a small-scale survey of less than 10% of new teachers and 12% of principals to make sweeping system-level claims and to compare different education providers." Squirt. Actually, Eero's data was robust. You might think, almost 10%, that's not many. Turns out it's 751 teachers. Generally, a survey is considered statistically valid if you talk with more than 400 people. There's more. Eero also interviewed 278 principals at schools that employ new teachers, 23 new teachers from schools in different settings, mentor teachers, and tapped data from the Ministry of Education, the Teachers' Council, and Stats New Zealand. Moreover, the Maxim Institute and the New Zealand Initiative have highlighted the deficits in university-based teacher training and how that affects students. What you're seeing isn't a dispute between two groups with different views on the same situation, one of which hasn't done enough homework. You're seeing a turf war. Someone has something to lose and they're fighting to defend it. Hence the squid ink. The phrase is useful when evaluating any current public debate. It might be unions weighing in on charter schools, ditto discussions of tax cuts, media disintegration, or law and order. Real squid ink, by the way, can be brownish, reddish, or dark blue, evoking some of the hues associated with a political spectrum. Remember, any party can produce the stuff. So beware, when determining whether an utterance is squid ink, ask, who has something to gain here? Who has the most to lose? Once you determine who the squid is, their ink becomes very legible indeed.
Thanks for listening to the Maxim Institute podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us and keep up with the rest of our research and analysis of politics and policy in New Zealand, you can sign up on the homepage of our website to get our monthly forum email and invitations to future Maxim Institute events. You can search and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. From the team at Maxim, mā te wā, goodbye for now.